what you want, when you want it, where you want it. This is The Mesh.
Brothers in Tech is a weekly podcast focused on personal and home technology, helping provide you, our fellow brothers and sisters in tech, with some information, assistance, and recommendations. The television has long been one of the cornerstones of our home technology lives, but if you haven't shopped for a television recently, you might be a little overwhelmed by the features you can choose from. 4K, 8K, LCD, LED, HDR. Well, the brothers are here to help. In this episode, we discuss the features that you should be considering when searching for that new television. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Brothers in Tech here on the Mesh.tv podcast network. My name is Alan Jackson. Over here is Brian Jackson. Brian, how are you doing?
Alan, I'm doing pretty good. Am I looking the right way?
Yeah, you are.
Oh, sweet. Nice.
Yeah.
I'm good, Alan. Yeah, doing good. I think we're getting the hang of this. It's taken us, 4 or 5 episodes just to figure out which direction we are on the screen. But
the video's still been a little. We're tiptoeing into it, but I think we're getting better.
We're getting better.
We're finally getting the video to match our silky smooth, super uber professional voices.
Which was incredibly hard to do. Right? Yeah. That's a high bar to meet. That's a high bar.
Absolutely. Well, this is Brothers in Tech, where Brian, my brother, and I get together and we talk technology. But we're talking about personal, home, family technology, things that you could come into contact with every day, things in your own personal life that utilize technology. We try to be a resource for ideas, discussions, and how-tos on using home and family technology. We like to say we're used to being the go-to people in our own family for IT and tech-related issues. We know there's others out there too. We want to be a resource to them as well as to the people that they've been helping all this time as well in their own families. So, Brian, we're going to be talking about a topic today that is, some people could see as almost the centerpiece of your home and family technology life, or at least from an entertainment perspective. Yeah. And it is television sets. We're going to talk about TVs.
And you know what? We've been doing this how many years? 2 years, a little over 2 years. And this is the first time we're talking about TVs.
Talking about true television sets. I mean, we've talked about a lot of
television
things on TV, a lot of content and how to get information you want on your TV and services and such. But this is the first time we're talking about the actual hardware, the actual television set, And Brian, you're kind of coming at this from a little bit of a more immediate situation where you actually went out and did purchase a new TV fairly recently, like in the last few months, right?
Yes. Yeah. It's been, I think probably a month and a half, maybe.
Okay. So the experience is still very fresh on your brain, and you've got
some
thoughts and ideas on it. Yeah. Okay.
Very
good.
fresh. And I do need to preface it. We've already used TV, but actually I think that made me a little bit wiser to the entire process because I was looking at used only. But that forced me to go back and really do research on TVs. And it had been, 6-7 years since I had a new TV. So so that took a lot of research. So yeah, I'm happy to share a little bit of the trials and tribulations I went through with that process.
So we're going to do that in just a moment. Talk about television sets, kind of some considerations, what features and options you need to be aware of, what some terminology you need to know when looking at TV sets and the options available today. But Brian, before we get into that, I do have something to bring up. This is kind of off script. I'll go ahead and tell you, you and I have a very detailed script we follow for these shows. But I'm going to go off script for a minute.
I'm looking good. What is he doing? That's not on our list. Okay.
So, all right. Every month we get together and we do an episode, a Bits episode, a Brothers in Tech Suggestions episode. This is not that Bits episode. We'll have that coming up probably in a couple of weeks. But based on some recommendations of a company that you're a big fan of, I had bought a product a year ago that was by this company, and I want to do a little follow up because we had a little situation arise today, and with this product, and I just want to kind of recap, kind of a quick follow up. I didn't want to wait for the Bits episode in a couple of weeks because I know we're going to have a lot of fun stuff to talk about there, and I didn't want to bring us down, but I feel like this is important to share and just make mention of. Okay, since we are talking home and family tech, this is an issue
I feel like this might be a therapy session. This might be a
this
therapy
is an issue
session.
that affected my whole household. Okay.
Okay.
So,
all right, let's have at it.
So we bought last year, and I think I even mentioned this maybe in a Brothers and Tech Suggestions episode myself, but I know the company you've talked about, Wise, WIZE.
Mm-hmm.
Many products you are a fan of. I think you've got several of their products. I only have one product. It is the Wise Scale, and I am holding it right now for those of you on video to see. Okay.
Okay. Yep.
It is a digital Wi-Fi enabled or Bluetooth enabled scale, not Wi-Fi enabled. So you can set this down. It runs off of AAA batteries. As you stand on it, it gives you a digital readout of your weight and body mass index and several other factors. And then if you have your Wise app open, it will also kind of transmit that information to the app and then feed it into like your Apple Health or other health tracking app. So it's been great.
Yep.
I pride myself on the fact that I do weigh myself very, very frequently. I do work out. I am very, very conscious of what I'm eating. And I have been extremely pleased with my results over the past year. Very, very pleased. I mean, to the point where I'm just seeing really, my weight is getting where I want it to be. I have goals set up and I'm meeting those goals, making it work. Other members of my family, my wife and my two children, have also taken to, hey, I'm going to also use the scale too. So everybody's using it. Everybody loves it. It's great. It is so convenient. It was also fairly affordable at the time too. So we feel like it has been a very worthwhile investment. But we had somebody come over to our house and they tried the scale and they promptly returned from coming off the scale and being like, yeah, your scale's wrong.
Oh no. How wrong in the wrong direction, I'm guessing.
In the wrong direction. They said it's showing me almost 15 pounds lighter than I am.
Oh.
And we said, oh, that's crazy. You must be using a bad scale at home because this is a Wise digital scale. This is it. And then we pulled out an old manual scale like we had down in our basement and said, well, let's just try this. Tried it. And with yet another friend of ours that was over too, had them try. And the results are pretty unanimous. Our Y scale is about 13 to 14 pounds off.
Oh my gosh.
And it has been off for a while. So.
Or has it been off or has it just been progressively worse because you guys have seen such great results?
It could be getting progressively worse, but either way, that nice little downward slide of where I've seen my weight go over the past 6 months, it is not real. It is fabricated. It is the Y scale is trying to become an emotional support coach scale, and I don't want it to be. I want it to be an actual scale. My wife, my children have all been using the scale. We've all been so happy with where our fitness progress has been, but it's not right. And I was on a text chat with Wise support for quite a while today. Tried everything from recalibrating the scale, which we did several times, to no avail. At one point, they even had me changing out batteries and saying, you need to be using alkaline batteries instead of generic brand batteries. And maybe that's the issue. And I got some nice Duracell alkaline batteries. Nope, that's not the problem either. Actually, I think that made it worse. It actually felt like it got even lower when I put those batteries in. So.
Oh no. Okay.
We have had quite the adventure with the scale today. And got to admit, emotions are pretty low right now in the Jackson household because of this.
Yeah.
So anyway, word of caution.
That's not good.
Hey, look, Wise, great company. I do think you have a lot of great products. My brother is a staunch advocate. This is my one Wise product. And granted, it has been a year, but I don't know for how long this year this problem has been there. Has it been there from the beginning? Did it just start the time I started seeing my weight get a little bit lower over time? I don't know. But now I question everything. Everything in my life is questioned. I don't know what to believe. I don't know what's right. So what?
Well,
So here I am on a tech show pouring my heart out about what's going on with my digital scale, and it's really wrecked me a little
are you
bit.
on a
So I'm
are
just
you on a
saying,
tech show right now? Are you really on a tech show? Or are you questioning that
yes.
as well?
Oh, I
You're
don't know.
questioning
Are
it.
we talking tech? What's real? I don't know.
Okay, well, all right. So here's one. I'm
We are going
very
to talk
for
about
being
TV some minute, I
a
promise,
support
but
person. Yeah, for
yeah,
being a support person for Wise, I am very, very sorry to hear that.
yeah.
And I would like to speak for Wise by saying I apologize for that.
Thank you.
However, the real issue with all of this is that you let someone else use your scale. You guys would be perfectly happy right now if the scale was continuing to lie to you. You guys were going about your day.
I know.
It
You're
wasn't
right.
making life worse,
Yeah.
right? Everything was feeling good. You said we feel really good about ourselves. It's like
We did.
great,
Yeah.
great.
You're right.
Then,
No, you're
you
right.
know,
Actually, we all decided that the worst thing we could have done is let somebody else
let
in
someone else.
to try it.
Don't
We could
let
have just
someone
lived in
else
our
in.
fantasy world and kept believing
Yep.
all the progress we were making.
Don't let someone else in, and don't go try any other scales. Right? Stick to the
Just live in
scale.
our bubble. We just live in our
Live
own
in your bubble.
scale bubble.
Live in your bubble. Yep. Live in your bubble.
I know.
You know.
I do take some responsibility for that. That was more of a.
Yeah.
It was a braggadocious move for me, being like, "Oh, hey, you want to? We got a scale over there. Check it out." And shouldn't have done that.
Oh man. Well, I'm sorry. That's the lack of calibration seems very frustrating, right? And that if so you calibrated it zeroes out after you calibrate.
No,
I
it
assume
still zeroes
and then-
out.
Yeah.
The whole thing is you're supposed to calibrate it by you can just like quickly step on it and immediately step back off, and the digital scale just goes right to zero. If it goes to zero, you're calibrated. Ours has been calibrated. Ours made no change. Anyway,
Have you tested? I mean, again, sorry, this is just on the tech side. But if you were calibrating, do you have a standard weight? A dumbbell, a barbell, or something.
But it won't register those. We have a dumbbell. It's like a 10 pound.
It needs
dumbbell.
to be a certain, like 100 pounds or something, or 80 pounds.
Well, maybe that, or I don't know if it's just something with the pressure where the pressure has to be on the plate to stand on or something. But we've tried setting dumbbells on there to do that exactly. Yeah. It won't register anything for those. So
but also try stepping on, stepping off, stepping on, holding the dumbbell, and seeing if it is exactly 20 pounds higher, or whether it's a graduated kind of expansion. Like it could be whoever's the heaviest in the house, right? Maybe they have the worst difference. I don't know. You may have the worst difference, and other people may have.
Now, granted, I say all this, and I am frustrated about the situation. I mean, I will give them the Y scale was when I bought it. It was on discount, and so it was $12.
So you have been basing your happiness in life on something you spent $12 on. So
I base my happiness on a recommendation of a company you made, Mr. Brian. So
I don't remember recommending the scale. I do remember recommending the company.
You recommended the company. That they were all affordable products and very
they are
very, very nicely priced, which I agree they are.
They're totally.
I should have asked, but do they work?
I don't remember you ever asking. That's correct. That's correct. That would have been a follow-up episode. That would have been a deep dive episode. So, well, I'm sorry to hear that. And but let me just say, as your exercise science brother, right? Mm-hmm. Weight isn't everything, Alan. Okay, weight isn't everything.
But I'm pretty
sure.
What?
And you also no, but you know what? Muscle weighs more than fat.
So you're saying that basically it was removing the muscle equation out of there and trying to show me, but really all that extra weight is just my muscles.
Well, it could be that, you know what, if you just approach it as I weigh a little more now, but I'm weighing that because I'm healthier and I've replaced some of my area of fat with muscle, and therefore I'm going to weigh more. That's why people weigh more when they start working out.
Yeah. Well, just know that once we realized all this had happened and the impact it was having on us, we all just went out and got milkshakes and just said, screw it, whatever.
Self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Let's just go ahead and just be the thing that we're going to be. So,
all right.
Well, I hate that. But let's, I mean, yeah. I hope.
All right.
Here's one thing I will say for all that I've talked about Wise in the past, I have never really been happy with Wise's tech support. That is where
Well, their
they
tech support
totally lack, and
was-
I'm obviously not.
It was
holding
fine
on to it.
today. They did give me some kind of random suggestions, and I did try them. But they're to a point now of saying, "Yeah, okay, something's wrong. Here's some
Spend
things.
another $12.
Send us some information. We'll see what we can do about under warranty." It's been over a year. It's like been 14 months, and their warranty's a year. So I don't think I'll be able to do anything about it. But again, it was $14. So
Yeah. Well,
I mean, I'm not saying flippantly
kind of an
like,
important
I'm
thing,
just
though.
burning money, but I guess for a year of living under a false sense of health and fitness, I guess I can splurge another 14 or $15 and get a new one. So
okay. Well, here's my last thing I'll say.
yeah,
Tell yourself, since you now know that it was off, tell yourself it's been off fully for that year or year and a half, and you still saw
Right.
improvement.
okay,
So relatively, you saw
There's-
improvement.
that's the
Okay.
encouragement I needed right there.
There
Okay,
you go.
so
All right.
even though it makes me even more depressed to think what the
So you
weight
just were a
was
lot
before
heavier
I
to
started.
start than you really thought were. Yeah, you were
Okay.
a lot heavier.
I can
to
actually
start.
buy that.
Yeah.
I can buy that.
There you
Yes,
go.
I do feel like there's been a decrease. It's just not been at the numbers we were wanting them to be or expecting it would be. Okay.
Well,
All right.
let's talk about
Let's-
something, Alan, that can get you not exercising at all and watching
Yeah.
TV and being even lazier.
Let's talk about
Let's do
things that I probably just need to be doing is just sitting on my butt watching TV. So let's talk about those instead. Okay.
Sounds good.
Television sets. Let's get over to that. So television sets, Brian, there are a lot of considerations to make when looking at buying a new TV. Now, every generation of TV sets, there's always features and specs you got to pay attention to, and they change over time. Right now is no different. If you have not bought a new TV in several years, there are some new considerations and things
Yep.
to keep in mind. Brian, that was the case with you. You said you hadn't bought one in 7 years.
Yeah, it's been a long
You
time.
were
Maybe
being
longer. I
introduced to
don't
a whole slew of possibly new options and things to be considering with that. So
know. Right.
let's
Yeah,
talk through
so-
the first thing that you feel like is probably the most important thing. If you're going to go out and buy a new TV, what's the first thing that we're going to be looking at right away?
Well, I'll tell you exactly what my first reason for looking at a TV was: size. Trying to
Okay.
figure out, like, I don't know about you, Alan, but asked me 10 years ago, and I would have said there is no way I would have anything above a 50-inch screen. That is crazy, right? I mean, that is just too big. You have no reason to do that. And that's what we had in our house. But we moved to this new house a year ago, and our movie room or our TV room has a bigger area, a bigger wall. And I felt like what we had almost felt too small for the area. We were further away from the TV than we used to be at our old place.
Mm-hmm.
So we went in strictly looking at, okay, we got to figure out what the size we want to have in there that will, handle the next 7 or 8 years of growth that we might have. So for us, it was going from a 50 to a 65-inch and saying, all right, that's what we wanted to do. That was the target. So I think size is the first issue that most people, I think, will deal with. If you're saying you're going to buy a new one, there's probably a reason why you're buying a new one. Either the old one is too small for your area, or maybe it's just gone bad. But most of the time, I think it's people saying it's time to move to a bigger screen, a screen that's going to fit in your area. So what are the considerations that I should have been keeping in mind, Alan? I looked at it and said, what's the size of my wall? I've got two pictures on the wall, and I have the TV in the middle, center between it. I think I could fit this amount.
Sometimes people are just forced with a certain space that they have a certain, geographic width that they can go into. Yep. And that kind of dictates your space. But if you have a blank, fresh canvas wall where you can go any size you want, there are some general rules of thumb. Now, first and foremost, before I put out any dimensions and calculator to use to figure it out, first and foremost, what feels comfortable watching from your viewing distance. I've seen some situations where people have a TV set that is way too big for where they're going to have their couch or places they sit in front of it. And when you're watching your TV, you can actually feel your head having to move
Yep.
to like see other parts of it. Okay, that's a bad sign. If you're having to do a lot of head motions to move, the TV's too big for where you are sitting and your space you're in. But then, of course, the other flip side, if it's too small, if it's just uncomfortable to view from a distance, or you're having to strain to see things, or details aren't made out, that's first and foremost, it has to be comfortable. But there is a general rule of thumb that they say for screen size, and that you should be sitting a distance from the TV that it's about 3 times more than the height of the screen of the TV you get. So let's just say, in theory, if the height of the screen was 35 inches tall, okay, like top to bottom, not the diagonal that you see on the screen right now, but the height, the actual measured height, top to bottom of the screen. Let's say if it was 35. In general, they're saying then you should be sitting, 3 times that away. So that'd be what, 105, right? Now you should be 105 inches. So that's about
almost 9 feet.
9 feet.
Yeah, you should be around 9 feet away. Mm-hmm.
So what you could do is work backwards and say, okay, well, if I'm going to be sitting 8 feet away from the TV where I have the couch position, you can do the math on that and say, okay, well, then what height screen does that give me the capability for? Now, again, that is a rule of thumb. If you've got a bigger space and you like the little bit more immersive, bigger TV, you can go a little bigger. And also, if you've got a more confined space, there's nothing saying you can't go a little smaller. But just know, if you go much smaller than that ratio, it could be getting tough to see. If you go too much bigger than that ratio, it could be a lot of head motion to move around to see things on the screen. That's the rule of thumb. Now, that's for HD. We are going to talk about HD resolution a little bit versus 4K, which is considered Ultra HD. That's for HD viewing. Now, if you are on a 4K Ultra HD TV screen, which most new ones being made now are kind of in that ballpark, you can actually cut that ratio in half. So you can actually be 1.5 times distance compared to the height of the screen. Okay. So you can actually sit a lot closer, even to a bigger screen with an Ultra HD screen. The reason for that is, we're going to get to in a minute, is the resolution on the screen is, when you have a 4K TV screen, there's more pixels on the screen making up the image, which means even if you sit closer, you won't be in danger of seeing those pixels, where you could be in danger of seeing them if you're sitting too close on an HD screen.
Right. And this does not suggest that a 4K TV means you won't have to turn your head if you get really close, right? That size of the screen is still an issue, right?
Yes.
But you're saying the actual visual image and not being close enough to actually see the pixels of the image.
Right.
That's how far away you need to be.
You basically, you have more room to move. Now, granted, I still think it's probably good to keep that original 3 times the height rule in mind, but just know that if you are in a smaller space and you really want a bigger screen, it is a little theoretically better. You are able to get closer to the screen, even on a bigger screen, with an Ultra HD 4K screen, because of that pixel density, because it just is, it's a better viewing experience closer up than just a standard HD screen is.
Yeah.
Okay. Again, it still ultimately comes down to what's comfortable viewing wise. I mean, I definitely encourage people to test out however they can. Sometimes when you go and buy a new screen, like using a Best Buy or some other websites that have, sell TV sets, some of them have those same, we talked about in a previous episode for shopping for furniture, the little AR display where you can actually see what the screen size would look like on your wall before you even go out and get one. And that may give you a good idea of like, oh, wow, that's actually going to seem a lot bigger on the wall than I expected. Or it may not be big enough and I want to go a little bigger. So that's a couple tools I would recommend checking out with that. But that's some rule of thumb also on screen size. Yeah. Yeah.
And Alan, let me just, since I quickly looked it up, just since you threw out some examples of the height of the screen.
Mm-hmm.
So the height of a 70-inch TV is going to be around almost 35 inches high. So if you take 35, as you said earlier, 35 times 3 divided by 12, there you go, 8.75. So you're really, a 9 feet away. You're talking about a 70-inch TV that you could potentially handle, with your the perception of that, right? So that's a lot bigger than I would have thought initially, as someone who was like, oh, I'm going to be, 10 feet away. a 50-inch TV is fine, and it is fine if you believe that's what
Fine.
you like. But the fact that your eyes can handle more, and as long as you're comfortable with potentially turning your head a little bit on some of these things. But yeah,
Brian, if your goal is to get the biggest screen you can for the space you've got, then you use that formula and max out just where you're going to be, and use that formula to kind of determine the height of the screen. I wouldn't go much bigger than that ratio. Is the key, but it is nice to know how far you can go. I had to use that ratio when I was putting in my projector. I know we're not talking about projectors, but same thing. I actually measured out, okay, if my screen is going to be this big, I want to make sure my seating is at least this far away. So I'm not overwhelming, us with the screen size and all. So it's a lot of consideration to put it on screen.
Yeah. And just anybody who remembers going to a theater, if you haven't been to one in a long time, it's been years since I've been to a theater. But the times where you go and have to sit way up front and you realize how even visually disturbing it is to kind of watch and having to see different parts of the screen by turning your head, right? Everybody wants to be back in the center of the theater. It's the same idea, right? I mean, yes, your wall could have handled a big screen, but doing that and being close does not necessarily mean it's a better visual experience. And
that's true.
Because then you're dealing with brightness, you're dealing with head turns and all of that stuff. So that's one thing is size. And I do think that has changed dramatically when the size of TVs have continued to grow. People's TV rooms have continued to grow. It used to be, I mean, I know every TV that I bought in the past had been an accessory to a room rather than the main part of a room. And we were looking to fill in a space where we had a spot for it. Now we have an area we want to watch movies, or we want to watch TV. Yeah. So things have changed a little bit. So,
well,
so size, right?
That's a consideration. Now we mentioned resolution a little bit. That's the thing that people are going to hear a lot more buzzwords around when they go to shop for a TV. Is think about the different levels we've gone through with TV sets when it comes to resolution. Resolution meaning, in theory, how many pixels are on the screen at one time, making the image you see. So DVD quality was like, years ago, that's what we had when we were playing things on DVD on kind of standard definition, and what we consider. That was like 720 pixels across, 480 pixels tall. So that was standard definition. Then we moved to HD, high definition, and we actually got it in two flavors. We got what's considered 720, and then went up to 1080p. 720 was 1280 pixels wide by 720 pixels tall. So more pixels on screen one time than standard definition. HD 1080 went up to 1920 pixels wide by 1080 pixels tall. So even more information jammed into a screen. What does all this mean? It means that you've got more pixels, the density of them are so much better that they create a cleaner image. They create a sharper image. Details are more noticeable because you've got more pixels to make up for it and all that. Now, though, we're up to UHD, which is Ultra HD, which is also known as 4K. Okay, it's just all the same terms. Some places really focus in on the UHD label. Some really focus on 4K, but it's the same thing. And here, I'm going to show what we're talking about here. The 4K is basically 4 times the resolution of what we were getting with the highest level HD beforehand. So here's a little quick chart. You can see Ultra HD, 3,840 pixels wide by 2,160 pixels tall. So 4 HD screens could, in theory, fit inside a Ultra HD image. So now this is all still in your same TV set. It's just more pixels jammed in that image to create a sharper, more higher resolution image. Okay. Right. So that's where we are right now. That's kind of the standard. If you were to go into a store and look at a new TV set, I can't imagine that they would have any that are just HD unless they're like really small budget TVs. And then you may have a couple that might be higher than 4K, but we're going to mention that in a minute. But 4K is really the standard right now. It's kind of the one that more content is starting to happen for 4K TV screens than ever before. We are to the cusp now where it used to be maybe couple years ago, it was a little questioning whether you go with an HD screen because there wasn't a whole lot of, I'm sorry, 4K, because there wasn't a lot of 4K content out there. So you'd be buying a TV set that would really hardly ever see 4K content. Nowadays, though, we're getting kind of close to that point. I mean, the latest Apple TV box is all can accommodate 4K content. Netflix will do 4K on select titles. HBO Max, if you have that service, does a lot of their titles in 4K. So there are more and more 4K options for people. So that I typically am recommending, yes, you should get a 4K screen. Even if you don't feel like you watch a lot of 4K stuff right now, that stuff will just keep getting more and more common over the next couple of years. So yeah.
And if you have non 4K content right now, so you're subscribing to regular Netflix and not the 4K version, or regular YouTube TV but not the 4K version, and you have a 4K TV, just think about it this way: you've got 4 times the pixels on a 4K TV of that same size as you would have had for a 1080p. And if you've got those pixels and you're not using them, it just means that 4 of those pixels together are going to make up 1 pixel worth of content. So you're just not distinguishing, the pixels. I don't think it's necessarily going to look worse. Alan, one of the things you and I were talking about before the show, I don't think there's, like there used to be, an issue where if you went to a 1080p TV and tried to play standard definition stuff, it would stretch it out. It would make it look really
bad,
weird, right? It's just not. It wasn't the dimensions that were appropriate.
Yeah,
the dimensions are still the same. Like the proportions are still the same. It's just the amount of detail within those proportions, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
you're right. I mean, I tell everybody, look, 4K is the way to go on TV sets right now, even if only a fraction of what you're actually going to see is 4K content.
Yeah,
to know its capability is there is good. And then also, like you were saying, even playing HD content on a 4K, a lot of these TV sets will do some things where they can do some upsampling, where they're going to take that HD image and just try to maximize the use of pixels as much as possible. It's not perfect, and it's definitely still not going to look like pure 4K content, but it does look better. So I think it's worthwhile to do. And again, almost every major TV streaming service has options for 4K now. So, and I kind of think you'd be a little hard pressed to find a TV that's not 4K compatible nowadays, new ones anyway, too. So that's still the direction I think people should go. It's 4K, just because of the wealth of content available now.
Yeah. And this is where I'll say maybe just a slight difference about my situation. Given that I went into it, one, I was going to look for used. I like finding used deals where, I can get a better deal on something and feel as though I can still make it work. But I was looking at not just 4K. I was looking at the size and trying to figure out what was the best 65-inch TV that I could find, that was used, that I felt like would provide me with the best quality. I ended up going with a 4K version, but there were some non-4Ks from several years ago that were really, really good TVs and good screens and good quality things that I was looking at the same time. But if you are looking at new, I agree with you. There's no reason. I mean, prices are not that far off that there's really no reason that you should not be looking at a 4K.
I'll say this:
future-proofing yourself, I think.
And also, the bigger the screen size, the more important I think having the 4K screen comes in.
Right.
I will say, if you are looking at a screen size that's maybe less than 50 inches or 48 inches or less, you're not going to notice a difference, I don't think, unless you're really up close to the screen, close. So if you're looking at a smaller screen maybe you're just wanting to have a small TV like in, a kitchen or somewhere else, or not anywhere you need a big, huge screen, and you can find a good deal on an HD screen that's not 4K, that's probably going to be fine because you're not going to be able to tell a difference. But any main viewing screen you've got in a living room or den or whatever that you're actually going to be watching a lot of content on, that's bigger than 45 or 50 inches diagonal, you're going to want to get that 4K, I think.
Yeah.
Just like this image on the screen shows. I mean, just to help you understand, full HD, you can see some pixelization if you look close enough at the image that's up there. Ultra HD gets a little better. And then we didn't even talk about 8K. There is an 8K standard rolling out, which is now being called full Ultra HD. So FUD FUHD. Okay. It is 4,320 pixels. Gosh, what is that? Tall. Okay. Where 4K was 2,160 pixels tall. It is double that, which is 4K to 8K. There may be a couple 8K TV sets out there for sale. A, they're going to be super expensive. B, there's nothing 8K content available now. We're at the point where we were when 4K was first being introduced a few years ago, where there was nothing for 4K. It was kind of more of those cutting edge things. So that's where we are with 8K. I do not recommend anybody go out and get an 8K TV set unless you have a very specific purpose why something content wise you're going to be watching on your TV is going to be coming to you in 8K. It's going to be years before all these other streaming providers start tapping into 8K content. So it's not worth making the jump now. I don't feel like at all for anybody. 4K is going to be still a good high standard for some time.
Yeah, Alan, and someone may be thinking, well, just a minute ago, you talked about future proofing. And if I only buy a TV every 10 years, should I not go buy the best TV I can possibly can at one time? And I would say you also need to look at the timeline of technology and the price for that technology. We are at the front end of 8K, which means it's stupidly expensive, as you said. Yep. Just like if you would have bought a full 4K screen 4 years ago, it was crazy expensive to get it, right? Now you can get it for exactly what you were able to get a regular 1080p 4 years ago. So now's the sweet spot for 4K. You're right. You can still future-proof yourself for at least 5 more years. And even after that, it's not like you're going to be disappointed with what you have. It's just that there may be the new thing that may be happening. But at that point, 8K will start to come down. So
and there's also a point to consider, Brian, with all these resolutions as well. When we went from standard definition, old traditional cable, TV, DVD, all that, to HD, it was a noticeable change. I don't think many people could look at it and say they didn't see a difference. There was a very noticeable quality difference. We went from 720 HD to 1080. You can tell a little bit of difference, not a lot. There's a lot of people who, yourself included, were watching HD content and not really knowing it wasn't 4K.
Right.
And yes, on a big screen, you can notice a little difference with 4K. You can notice it being better. But what I'm saying is the steps where we notice it are getting a little more gradual. Imagine going from 4K to 8K. I just don't know if it's going to be quite the gigantic double picture quality that I think people are going to be sold on. So that's another reason I think we're fine to wait for a while for anything 8K. Once some of the major providers start producing content in 8K format, then you can start saying, all right, maybe that become the next phase for us. But I think anybody buying a TV now that's 4K, you're going to be set for a good while.
Now
absolutely.
that's to suggest that you're talking about a constant size. If we continue to grow our TVs as we have over the last 20
years, the TV gets bigger.
Right?
If we're going up to 100
inch going
TVs.
to the 90, 100, because it's wall TVs, full wall TVs, and we have full theaters, that sort of thing.
Sure.
So I'd say if you're someone who's putting in a theater, if you're putting in a theater that is a projector, and the projector potentially has an option for an 8K, that's where I think because the projector potentially could go further away from the screen, make it bigger.
Yeah.
And therefore you could pay upscale, right? But that's expensive.
It's super expensive. I mean, 4K projectors right now are still fairly new for the projector market. So just to be aware with that. But 4K is kind of still where it's all out right now, resolution wise, but that is the different styles of resolution. Just remember, UHD is Ultra HD. That is the same as 4K. If you see that marketed or branded anywhere, UHD and 4K, same thing. That's where we want to be right now, I think. Now, Brian, there's also another big factor that I think you got to look at too, is what's the type of TV set? Like what type of technology is it using to put it details up on the screen? And you really have nowadays, I mean, there are various versions. You've had LCD, you've got LED, you got OLED, which is OLED, and then QLED. That's kind of our, that's the difference you've got. Really, when it boils right down to it, is basically we're saying you've got LCD screens or you've got different versions of LED screens. LCD screens are going to be generally more commonly available. They're going to be at a better price point. More than likely, it's what most consumers end up getting is an LCD screen. But it is known that the LEDs, especially the QLEDs, the QLEDs, are known for much better, even better picture quality. And it's all because of the way that behind the panel, the way the lights are configured. That's the different technology between LCD and LEDs, right?
Yep.
Well, it affects brightness. It affects a little bit of vibrancy of color. It affects different tones of your image that you probably, I mean, if you put the two side by side, LCD and LED, you will notice a difference. Right. Now, Willie, you notice a difference if you don't see an LED screen and you're just looking at LCDs and you've got a really beautiful image, you're fine. But if you're really striving for probably the best kind of picture quality you can get, those QLEDs right now are kind of the ones that people are going to.
Yeah. And I think it is. Yeah. I mean, if you think back a few years, if we would have had this conversation 10 years ago, the conversation would have been about LCD and plasma, right? It was back when we were looking at plasma, right? It's like plasma is going to be much sharper and it's going to be the slick screen. But then, of course, plasma went away really quickly because people realized burn-in, right? The fact that we're going to have something in there that's going to burn in the screen. Therefore, you've got a ghost image that's there all the time. If you happen to have, if you play Sports Center or sports all the time and you have the score screen at the bottom for a long period of time as you're watching sports, it stays there even if you go to another channel. Yeah. But now, most of that burn-in has gone away. That's not really an issue at all. So, nowadays I would say, yes, look for LED if you can, right? If you can get to that level, great. LCD is fine. LCDs are great. I mean, they have made real good advancements with that in terms of the backlighting and all that sort of stuff. So, but I think you're right that what's really more important, rather than those two looking at, am I spending for LED or LCD, is going to be the way in which it handles the picture, which we can talk a little bit more about in a minute, about how it handles, blacks and, the lighting and contrast and all of that sort of stuff. And I think that's going to be much more important as you look forward. So, yeah. So
that's different types. And really, I think it's you're going to get what you pay for. You put more money into your TV set, you can afford a LED screen, you're going to get a better quality image. But that's not to say that LCD screens are poor quality image. Just you've got good image and then you've got superior image. That's kind of the angles you're looking at there between LCD and LEDs. LCDs, when you walk into a Best Buy or somewhere else, I'd say 90% of the screens you see floating around you out there are LCDs. Okay. So, but something that's an LED, you'll probably be able to notice the difference and see something that's a lot more vibrant and bright screen wise. Yeah. Right. Now, Brian, before we get into we got a lot of other considerations we want to mention about things. One thing I think that kind of ties in a little bit about picture quality, and I do want to bring it up because it is something that you hear a lot of buzz around, is this idea of HDR. Okay. Which, high dynamic range is what that stands for, HDR. So there is a standard dynamic range, and that is the way that colors, how realistic those colors look and how much contrast those colors have on the screen. We've been living with standard dynamic range for TV sets for a really long time. It's just been the last few years you've been hearing HDR as being kind of added on. So it kind of came about right after 4K started to get popular. It was kind of another layer added on top of these new screens to say, we now have a technology to add much more broad use of colors, and the colors are going to be a little more realistic. There's a better contrast where they're going to pop out more. The colors are just going to be more vibrant, I think. And so HDR is something I do recommend. I mean, I've actually even got a sample here just to show an example of what HDR and standard dynamic range. There you see on that image, just to kind of give you an idea. Left-hand side is the HDR. It's the high dynamic range. right-hand side is the standard dynamic range. So you got to get a little bit of sense. Yes, if you had never seen the image on your left, if you only seen the image on your right, you probably were going to be fine with it. But once you see the comparison with the one on the left, you're like, oh yeah, well that definitely seems like more the direction I want to go for what I'm viewing. So I do recommend HDR. It's almost as standard now as 4K TVs are. Like if you go buy a new TV, almost every 4K TV is going to have HDR as a standard option on it. But something to pay attention to, because there may still be some out there not. And I wholeheartedly encourage HDR as a format for that.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And the other thing that I had to learn a little bit about is there are different versions of HDR, right? The different standards of that. I noticed most of them would say they have some form of HDR, but then when you go and look at the ratings and go see the reviews of the TV, they'll very clearly state, oh yes, it does HDR, but it doesn't do it well, or it doesn't do it to this level, or it only has HDR, whatever. So there are some different standards. So I would make sure you don't just assume HDR is HDR, right? HDR means it's better than non-HDR, but it also means that the TV may have a certain level of that HDR quality, and that the term HDR has been around a while, especially in the photography world, right? If I were to take an HDR image, high dynamic range image, it means I'm going to take multiple exposures of the exact same image, layer them on top of each other. So I have this huge range of contrast and of colors and all of that. So, you see the really, really cool photography that's done with high dynamic range. And it's nice that you're starting to see the more vibrant. So my TV that I did buy has HDR. I think it's HDR 10. Is that one of the standards?
It is, right. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and you can tell when it's on or off. I think there's a setting to kind of turn that high dynamic range on or off. And you can just see that the reds will pop. They will become very vibrant reds, sometimes a little too much. I mean, I think when you look at it, you can see, you go, whoa, wait a minute, it almost looks pink, but almost looks kind of too red. It's distracting. Yeah. But I think some of that is just getting used to it. There's some content that tries to show off the use of HDR. And that's the other thing, is you have to obviously be watching a movie or something that has the HDR image that it's actually giving you to really get the most out of it. So, but yes, I think it's beautiful when you get it. So
yeah, and you mentioned too different flavors of HDR, and you're right. What's been the problem with HDR? Well, I guess the complication is that each TV manufacturer has kind of adopted some flavor of HDR or some enhanced version. You got HDR 10 plus, which is a standard that I think a couple of vendors have adopted. You've got Dolby Vision, which is a version of HDR that is also something standard that's being accepted. So I would recommend, if you're looking at TV, to see if it actually adopts one of those higher version quality of HDR, which is HDR 10 or Dolby Vision. Some will actually support both of them, so you wouldn't even have to really choose. You can just know that it's going to come, whatever the content is delivered to the TV, whatever format of HDR it's going to use, that's what the TV is going to pick up on. Dolby Vision, I think they're saying, I think it generally taste tests are, that's going to be your better version, but HDR 10 plus is also really good. And then you got kind of plain vanilla HDR, and that's going to be, again, it's going to be suspect to the manufacturer, how well they implement it and use it on the TV set. Probably a good idea to get some reviews about the TV you're looking at and see how good the HDR is on it. But it's just important to know what that is. It's all about the color vibrancy and the realism of the color and contrast that you're getting on your image. Okay.
Yep.
All right.
Al, let me talk about a couple of
Brian.
So there's a couple others that were really important to me. Well, I should say they were important, but some more important to me. But I think they would be important to the listeners. So think about a really easy feature to be considering is, what room am I going to be putting this TV in, and where is the light in the room? Really, really important feature. Okay, so if you have, the standard is that we put a TV on a wall that doesn't have a window because there's more space without the window for the TV to go, right? The problem is, if the window is behind you and you're watching the TV, you're going to get the reflection of that window in the TV. And that's a really big bummer for many people. I did not have that issue. Luckily, I'm in a basement and there's nothing behind me. So we didn't care about it. But I noticed that a lot of TVs, when you look at the ratings, they would clearly state the reflection capability or how much of a reflection. And they have kind of a standard way of doing that, playing a certain brightness, but then also putting something behind it and seeing to what level they can actually see that reflection. Because that can be super distracting, right? You're watching it during the day, you've got a window behind you. It's the same thing that with plasmas, back when plasmas were around. That was the big thing. Is like, if you've got a window, don't use a plasma because it's slick and you'll get a reflection. Use the LCD because at those times they were more frosted, fronts. So check that. If that's a consideration, make sure you look at that. The other is about how wide is your viewing area that you're actually going to be looking. So my wife and I were the only two people here in our house, and we have a sofa directly in front of it. So viewing angle wasn't really an issue. We do have a chair over to the side. So if we were to ever invite someone over to watch TV, I wanted to double check that those people would still see a decent image. So check the viewing angle, because most of the ratings will tell you, at this angle, at 45 degrees, the picture drops off, the brightness drops off this level, the image quality drops off this amount. So take a look at your room setup and figure out how wide are people going to need to be. And think about it not only about sitting, but, is this a place where you're going to watch sports, where people might gather and there might be multiple people moving around the room as they're watching this game? And, are people where they're going to be standing, can they still see? Because that was another big piece about plasmas a long time ago, and all of this. You had to think about how much of an angle can I have? There are curved screens that try to get past that, but if you're in front of it, they make no sense really. They're only good for some other people that are going to be moving around. But so I think take a look at the viewing angle, consider the reflections, and consider your room for those situations. Okay.
Good point.
Those two, again, neither one really mattered to me, right? They were important for me to look to say, well, I want to get a TV, given that I only get a TV every maybe 7 or 8 years. I want to get one that I potentially might move to another room, and I want to make sure that's not a consideration. So I'll get the best one I can. But the one that was a real consideration for me was black levels. That was a huge, huge thing for me. And for those who don't know what I'm talking about, you may think, my picture is great and there's great contrast and I can see vibrant colors and everything's going well. But if you're anything like me, the TVs I had before, which were great TVs for good, vibrant, colors, it was when you had dark on the screen, when you had a horror movie that was, in a dark time, all of a sudden the grays started to really streak. And even when it showed that it was supposed to be pitch black on one part of the screen, you could still see the outline of the screen, which told you that it was more of a gray, right? And so that was the big thing that I was looking for, is I want good black levels. I want it, to be kind of a high rating on black levels. And I notice it now. The new TV we have, it's, for lack of a better term, it's night and day from what I had before. And I notice it because when the image goes on the screen, and let's say that it's a TV show that goes dark and you can see, a person's face on one side, but on the left side of the screen is supposed to be just black, like there's nothing there. I no longer can see the edge of my TV. Like I can look and go, I don't know where the TV is, which means it's turning off that, the light behind that, so that you're not getting. So that means you're getting a really good contrast between the brightness and the blacks on the screen. And if you look at some of the ratings, and I'll bring up in a minute one of the rating websites that I used nonstop when I was shopping for this, but they'll even do some tests to say, okay, if we put an image in the center of a screen, like just a simple bright circle with the rest of it being black, what's the bleed over of that image in the middle, and how what's the defined space of the the TV? Can you actually see a difference between the screen and the bezel or not, if it's all supposed to be black? So that's something I think is really important. That's something that changes, because I get so frustrated. I used to get so frustrated watching movies, went to a dark part, and then all of a sudden it looked like my screen was grayed and I'd see pixels and I'd see all this sort of stuff happening, and it was really frustrating. It was the only time I got frustrated with the TVs. So take a look at the black levels, take a look at the contrast ratios to try to make sure that you're getting something that can actually create black. And that was totally foreign to me, that something would create black, right? But it's really, can it turn off, or is it going to have a glow behind it all the time? So
yeah.
Cool.
Cool.
You certainly know more about this than I do, because you make films and you make commercials and all that. But
no, you're right.
It's
important.
Yeah.
Well, one thing I will say was kind of a consideration for me when we're looking at screens. It's maybe a little more specific to just certain groups and people than others, but the refresh rate on a TV screen. Now, refresh rate typically measured in hertz. So 60 hertz is kind of a standard right now for a lot of TVs. The idea is that's how often a second, 60 times that the image is being refreshed on the screen. Now, for most applications, that's going to be fine. I mean, and basically the more refresh you have, the more refreshing, a higher rate, you're typically having smoother motion on the screen. Now, if you're watching something that's just a regular TV show or movie, you're not really going to notice a lot of difference. But where you could notice a difference and want a higher refresh rate is on sports, and definitely if you're playing video games on your TV, like a high-end, newer generation video game system. You want the smoothest motion you can get on the screen. And the way you get that is to go up to like 120 hertz on a refresh rate. So some TVs will let you do that. Some TVs will dynamically change it. Some TVs will feature both or one or the other. 60 is kind of a standard. And again, 60 is probably good for most people. But if you've ever noticed you're watching sports on your TV, if you feel like there's any stuttering of motion where it's just the running is not super smooth or something. And then again, if you're a gamer and you see any stuttering on the screen, or you just feel like the motion is just not perfectly fluid and it's affecting your gameplay, the refresh rate is where you can see some benefit from that. So just know 60 and 120 are kind of your standard options, and some TVs will allow you to do the 120, which I think gamers in your household or big sports fans will probably appreciate that more. So,
yeah. I would say there are certain things that when you watch them in 120, it looks a little bit weird. Like it makes it almost look too realistic sometimes.
Too real. You're right.
Yeah. Where it almost feels like, okay, this is like soap opera-ish as opposed to the way it was maybe filmed.
Yeah.
But so it's important that if you have something that is up, make sure it's something that also can be turned to regular 60. Or
I generally leave mine on 60 for movies and TV, other things, just I'm watching content. But if I really do want to watch, if the Super Bowl's on or a great tennis match or whatever, and I want to flip it over and see it in 120, I can do that. And I just feel like, it's a much more, you're right, it's more realistic looking. That can be bad when watching a movie or bad when watching a show, but it could be good when watching sports and definitely video games. Real hardcore gamers want to make sure that things are as smooth and as fluid as possible on their gaming. So, what else, Brian? A couple other considerations here. So,
well, one was another one that I think was important about the TV, and maybe important more for other people, but for me, it really wasn't that big of a consideration, was the number of HDMI ports. The number of connection capabilities. So do think to yourself, okay, how many things am I going to connect to this TV? Am I somebody that has a DVR player or a DVD player, has a cable box, has an Apple TV, has a Roku, has all these things that are going to connect in? Make sure you have multiple HDMI ports, because you want it to natively or naturally go between these inputs rather than you having to create some sort of splitter and all that stuff to be able to put multiple things in. So most of them, I mean, I couldn't find even older TVs out. And since I was looking at used, I couldn't find anything that would not have at least 3 HDMI ports. And for me, like I said, it really didn't matter, because I only have one thing plugged into my TV, which is an Apple TV. And that's where all my content is. So for me, the multiple HDMI ports didn't matter so much. But I also, given that I buy used, I also like to sell used. So I wanted to buy something that certainly I could see how it would not be appealing if I was going to sell this 3 years down the road if it didn't have multiple HDMI ports. So
you're right.
Have the HDMI ports. I don't think there's a real need anymore for doing the make sure it has a VGA, and make sure it has the, the standard video. I think some of that stuff, nowadays, almost everything that you're going to want to do is going to be HDMI.
Yeah.
Right.
Now, we can throw a little complication in the matter and remind everybody that there are different flavors of HDMI, unfortunately, but there are. There are different standards of HDMI. HDMI 1.0 is kind of your more standard, what we've been using for years. 2.0 is a new standard on HDMI that will support 4K, that supports high ultra HD resolution. Now they're coming out with the 2.1 that will add even more capability to a signal and will provide you capability to go up to 8K if you do that as well, I believe. Typically what you'll find with a TV these days is they may have multiple HDMI ports, but maybe only certain ones are the higher standard HDMI ports. So you may have 4 HDMI ports, but one of them or two of them are HDMI 2 or 2.1. So just to be mindful, if you're really wanting to make sure you're pushing out the highest 4K image, you do want to make sure HDMI ports support that. And in most cases, if it's a 4K TV, it's going to have a 4K HDMI port on it. So it shouldn't be a problem. But just to be aware of that. And if you ever did want to make sure that your TV could support any new capabilities that come along, you want to make sure you've got the newest HDMI ports on there as well. Now, higher HDMI ports also require higher quality cables, HDMI cables. You got to get some that are rated for 4K content. Using an old, cheaper HDMI port or cable may not give you the 4K content. You've got to really make sure they can be a little finicky. I've had some issues where some cables will or will not support 4K content. So you do need to pay attention. Unfortunately, it's made it a little more complicated. It's not just a simple plug and play for HDMI for all size, one size fits all. There are different flavors. But again, if you're buying a 4K TV, the HDMI ports on it will, at least one, will support 4K content. And that's what you need to make sure you plug into your streaming box or whatever you're using for getting stuff into it. But the number of ports is equally important. You're right about that. Couple quick things. One more quick thing I'll say is sound. I think we just need to go ahead and just prep everybody to make sure they understand using the speaker off of a brand new flat screen TV. The speakers are getting worse as time goes on. If you're just going to use the built-in speakers on your TV, mainly because the TV screens are getting thinner and the bezels are getting smaller, which means there's less room for good speakers built into your TV. Now, I know plenty of people who use the speakers in their TV built in and are fine with it. But especially if you've got a bigger room, a bigger space, and you need that sound to be a little better, just know that you're going to be really limited by the sound coming out of the speakers on those flat screen TVs. I wholeheartedly encourage people to consider, for any size screen, if instead of using the actual built-in sound from that TV set, is to look at getting a sound bar of some sort. And again, you can find these, they sell them, all over, any place where TVs are sold pretty much. It is a long strip bar that typically connects by HDMI, like a single HDMI cable, like you have an HDMI out of your TV sometimes, that will be your audio out, that can go into the HDMI of a sound bar. And it basically takes the place of your sound on your TV, but gives you a much richer, much better sound. Definitely for filling up a larger room a lot better. And it has better, some of these sound bars can provide you with, Dolby type sound and surround sound kind of quality. So I definitely recommend at least that. Now, if you've got a nice high-end sound system you want to plug your sound into from your TV, great. The more the better. But this is the best kind of replacement for just having the sound off the TV itself. I say that. And again, I know some people who have, smaller spaces that they're watching the TVs in, and they use the onboard screen monitor sound, and it's fine for them. But
no, I think that's rare these days. I think that's rare these days.
I typically like to splurge the extra $100 or so, on TV situations and get a nice, decent sound bar that will just give a lot more sound quality to your viewing experience.
Yeah. The other thing I would just briefly mention is that if you are going from a current TV that was maybe 8 to 10 years old, like I was, there were a lot more inputs on the back, as I mentioned earlier, lots of different types of inputs. And I had to rethink a little bit of the way I had my sound organized, because I was going in through different ports. I was going in through a stereo cable. I was going in through an optical cable. I was going into, even a 3.5, headphone, all of this stuff. I had all these, ways of cables that I had, spent money on to be able to connect to that TV. And then the newer TVs are pretty much HDMI. Some will have the optical out, which I think is great. It's still great if you can do an optical sound out, but HDMI can pretty much give you everything. So that's going to be the most readily available on the newer TVs. So just keep that in mind when you're looking at things like price and all of that. This may not just be the TV that you're going to want to get. It may be the sound bar. It may be the cables. It may be that, all of this may have to get rethought a little bit. Can I just mention maybe the age-old question that you and I have had discussions about before when we're talking about cost is, what about, the TV that I'm buying has all these smart features built into it. It has Netflix built into it. It has, Hulu built into it. All of this has a web browser built into it. So I don't need anything else, right, Alan?
Yes and no. Yes, these capabilities are built into a lot of TVs. On the screen is an example of a Roku TV, which is a TV set that, Hisense, TCL, some different manufacturers make, and it's got like a Roku built into it.
Yep.
We've railed against this for a long time, Brian. I remember a couple of years ago, you and I had an episode talking about streaming TV boxes, and we were wholeheartedly recommending that, you get a separate box.
Yes.
A Roku, an Apple TV, an Amazon Fire stick or box, and use that as your streaming solution. Just plug that one cable into your TV, and that's all you do. These TVs, I think you're going to be hard pressed to find a brand new TV that doesn't have something baked into it on this smart TV side of things. I will say, Brian, everything I've read and seen myself, they're getting better, the built-in ones, even though the problem you and I had with them before is they were typically slower the way they operated. The interface was clunkier to use. And plus you just always worry that, if a new Apple TV box came out, you don't gain any new capabilities because you have to wait on the one internal to your TV to be updated if it's going to be updated at all.
Yep.
So I will say they're getting better. I do say if you get a TV that has kind of a branded name smart TV integration like Roku, some are actually having Apple TV built into the TV sets, at least the Apple TV Plus channels and all built in. If you get someone's that would have the brand name kind of interface built into your TV, you're probably going to be okay. But I'm still more in favor for sure of having a separate box that I know I can swap out whenever I want to upgrade it.
Yeah.
I'm not tethered to what's inside the TV box itself. And I also feel like the interface and the smoothness of using it has always been so much better. So
Right.
I take it that's where you are as well, right?
I 100% agree that I still myself will, even if it has something baked in, I will be plugging in an external device. I like the external device to have a little bit more control over that. And if something were to go wrong, I don't want to have to replace the TV. I want to just replace that box. And I feel like that box can upgrade, that box can change. Here's the way I look at it. When I'm looking now for better content, because I finally have a TV that can actually see 4K, information. Well, that means I also need something to deliver that 4K information, which means it's going to be a lot more data that's going to be streaming, because everything I do is streaming. I don't bring anything in through cable anymore. It's just all through streaming and Wi-Fi. I just know that the built-in smart TV capabilities they don't have the same processors to be able to handle that bit of data coming in. Now they could probably handle it just fine initially. I just worry about a couple of years down the road when the content becomes even better, or the content becomes different, and all of a sudden Samsung already got you to buy the TV. They don't really have a whole lot of interest in updating your software on your TV. They already had you already bought it and you got the TV. Whereas Apple or Google, or Roku, when you buy their box, they know that box is their product.
Yeah.
So if their product starts to do poorly, they're hoping you buy another one. But at the same time, they continually update those things to make sure you can at least get what it is that you bought that thing to get, which is Netflix and Hulu and all that. So to me, I'm just a big believer in spend a little extra money.
I am too.
Have an external device. Now, of course, that means now you've got a different remote. You've got all these different things a lot of complications in that. But
there are. And granted, I want to be sensitive too to budgets. I mean, hey, look, if you're already putting a lot into a TV, you don't want to put another $100 into a streaming box. And the TV you're getting has a good name brand streaming smart TV function inside of it. Again, we've got a TV at our office that's a Roku TCL screen. Mm-hmm. I've used the Roku on it, and it's better than I expected, or better than it used to be for sure. So I'm not saying it's horrible experience. Just I think there is a lot of value in having a separate box. But hey, $100 is $100. If you really want to, if you'd rather put more money into the quality of your TV and not have to worry about buying extra stuff, then that may be a good enough route for you. So
Yep.
I would say main thing is just make sure it's one that's going to be able to stay updated. Make sure if it's a Roku branded smart TV built in, that you should feel pretty good about. Roku's pretty solid and stable. Right. You just may want to read some reviews too to make sure that manufacturer has a good history of keeping its smart TV components built in up to date, so you're not stuck far behind on versions or buggy software at all. So
yeah, for sure.
Brian, when it comes to price in general, I know the prices can range considerably. Just talking about pricing on TV, I mean, I get asked a lot, just what's kind of the going, what's the best deal for price per, size. And really right now, kind of as we record this, I mean, I'd say a 55 to 65, probably even leaning more towards the 65-inch screen is kind of the sweet spot right now for price performance comparison. I mean, you can spend $900 and get a really good 65-inch 4K screen right now.
Yep.
Which is
I don't
to
see
say
any
that,
need. I don't see any need for anyone to spend more than $1,000 if they are looking for 65 or less and a really good screen. Now, if you want the best and the best quality and the OLED and all the different versions of that, sure, you're going to pay a little extra. But if you just want a really, really good, solid 4K UHD screen, under $1,000. I was looking at things, and there's a big distinction now, and I recognize when I was looking at the, and one of the things I would continue to suggest for people, and again, I'll bring this up in just a minute, but do your reviews and look at the cost basis as an example of the quality. And normally I don't like to do that. I like to look for deals and say, they're charging this. Doesn't necessarily mean it's better than the one that's charging this. I think it does when you start to see a big jump. If you see something that's 500 and then another one that is 800, do take a look at the specs and figure out why, because there's enough in the market right now that they're going to be pretty close. Something that's $500 and something that's $600 from another brand are going to be pretty comparable, and something in the 700 to 800 is going to be comparable. Something in the 1,000 is going to be comparable. So do look at that. I mean, especially if you decide to go used like I did, and you're looking on eBay or looking on Craigslist or you're looking on Facebook Marketplace, ask the people what the not just the brand and the size. That's one of the more annoying parts. Is someone on Facebook's like, hey, here's a 65-inch Samsung. Okay, that's great, but there's a lot of 65-inch Samsungs, and there's a lot of them that are at different years. There's different levels within the years. So ask for the model number. I always say, ask them if they don't have it already, take a picture of the label on the back that gives you all the specs, the model number, everything about it, because that's what you go and type in, and you may find, that was the budget model from 5 years ago, not the good model from 5 years ago, and then you can start to compare your prices. But just compare it. I bought a used TCL 65-inch beautiful TV. It got Roku built in, even though I don't use that. But it's got HDR and Dolby Vision, and it's got 4K. And it was only 6 months old. Someone had sold it because they were moving and they couldn't take it with them. But I bought it for $420, I think.
That's a good deal.
And which is a fantastic deal, right? But even that, I think I finally looked at what it was brand new. You can get that same one for maybe $700-800. It's still really a good, affordable price for something that good quality. Yeah. So, yeah, I think you shouldn't feel like you need to spend more than $800, right? I'd say $800 is a really good budget to get a good high end, and less than that is fine as well. You'll still
unless you are building for a real high end dedicated, theater room. You're really wanting to put the best quality, and then by all means, you can definitely get higher quality going in the LED status of screens, go a lot higher on price. You will get what you pay for in most of these situations. But I think you're right. Regardless, look at the specs, look at the manufacturer. There's a lot of options out there, but if you just want a good home TV that's meant for just good, comfortable, casual viewing for you and your family, yes, 65-inch TV for $800 or $900 is kind of the magic spot right now. It used to be 55-inch was kind of the magic size to get it a really good break. It's moved up to 65. It'll be at 70 before too long, where 70 inches is then the tipping point, where if you go over 70 inches, it starts to get really expensive for the screen. So that's kind of where we are right now for sure. Yeah. Right. All right, Brian. Well, I think we've given a lot of good information about TV sets. There are a lot of factors.
Can I say one more thing, Alan?
Sure.
Can I just say one more thing real quick? Because I mentioned it a few times and I just wanted to make sure I did share it. But I'm going to show you really, really quick. I would strongly recommend anyone that is looking at TVs, do go to, this is a great website. It's rtings.com. So Artings, just like ratings. And what it does, what allows you to do is to plug in two different TVs and compare them, and they don't have to be the current models. So you can actually go back and see a 2019 model versus the 2021 model and be able to compare kind of apples to apples, because they go through the same system to compare them, where they'll say, if they're new enough, they'll even tell you, well, here's our choice of the two, right? If these two are the ones you're looking at, here's what we suggest. But what I love about it is you can actually go down and look at the very specific features, like local dimming, right? Which is kind of the part we were talking about before, is that will it dim on a very small scale? If you've got light in one spot, will it bleed over to the others or not? Mm-hmm. It'll give you a rating of those. It'll give you ratings as to whether it's good for sports, whether it's good for movies, HDR, and it does some great things. Reflection will be something it'll talk about. It'll talk about the bezel size. So I strongly recommend doing this. Now, there's a paid version where you can go and actually do more than two at a time, but I had no need to do that. I was just going in and plugging one in back and forth. Here's one little piece of advice, though, as you're looking at it. Notice here on there where it says tested using methodology version 1.6, and over here 1.6 as well. But this was a 2021 versus also a really nice OLED. If you happen to choose one, I'm just going to scroll down and look for one that's maybe older. Like, let's see if they actually give the years on some of these, like a 2017. So what you may see, and this is where you want to be careful, this one was tested using methodology 1.2. So they do have different standards every year as to how they're testing and how they're rating, right? They're rating maybe the black levels differently this year than they were 5 years ago because the technology's gotten better. So do make sure that when you compare, you realize, oh, okay, this may be rated as an 8.8 and the other one's rated as a 9.0. But if it's a 9.0 on an older standard, it may not necessarily be apples to apples. But but I just love the fact that I could pull up every one of these as I was looking at used TVs.
Sure.
I would ask for the model number, pull up the model number. And quite honestly, the TCL that I bought was not one that I wanted to buy initially when I saw it come out, because I didn't think I wanted a TCL. I had a small TCL before. It felt very plasticky. I felt cheap. I didn't like it, but it was a small, simple one for a bedroom. And I'm sure glad I used this ratings or artings.com, because I pulled the one up that was for sale and it said, this is so much better than some of the other ones I was looking for, that it was the high end version of the TCL, not the cheap intro version. So good. Do check your models and make sure that you're kind of comparing, apples to apples as you look through your different models. So
very cool. That's
all right.
rting.s.com, ratings without the A in the beginning. Yeah. So good. Yeah. Thanks for that. All right. Well, that is us talking TVs. So both some considerations, things to know, different specs and terms you may hear, and even some helpful hints on shopping and purchasing or comparing those TVs as well. And as always, Brian, we love to hear from people, their own experiences in this topic on buying TVs, maybe some features or things we didn't cover that's good to kind of follow up on that people have found helpful, or tips for buying TVs. So Brian, if anybody has any suggestions or thoughts for us, how can they go about getting a hold of us?
Let's see. They can send us an email at info@themesh.tv, and that will be your way of kind of telling us if there's some features about TVs that you think we missed, or we should consider, or we should pass along to other people. Or if you have thoughts of future topics that you'd like us to dive into. We've actually, several of our topics have come from, listeners that have sent in and said, you guys should look at this, and it kind of forced us to dive into it. So info@themesh.tv. You can also see us on the website, which is www.brothers-in-tech.com. So brothersin-tech.com. And that's where you'll start to see some more reviews from us, some helpful tips, as well as just access to earlier episodes. So come check it out.
I will be going on there to update things on the website after I'm done with some more time at the gym. I got to get some more gym time in, it looks like. So
that's what I hear. Yeah. Cause Wise has said they tried to, pump up people's egos and hoping that they never notice. So I'm sorry you found out. So, yeah, but you had bliss for a year and a half where you were just feeling good about yourself. I mean, it's like therapy, right? This really made you feel good. So, well,
honestly, the problem's only been the last 6 months. I mean, I noticed a big drop, first of the year, but that's also when I was really kind of like changing up my eating habits and my workout regimen. So I don't know. I don't know when the problem existed, if it's always existed, or if it just got worse over time or what. But anyway, very discouraging. I will keep everybody posted on the saga as it unfolds, as I find out what I do to fix or replace this situation. So, but thanks for the conversation about TVs. Good information, hopefully, for everybody. We hope you enjoyed it. And if you have any thoughts or questions, like Brian said, there's ways to reach out to us. But otherwise, we will be back in next week with another episode, another topic. And until then, we will take care. We'll see you soon. Thanks.
All right. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to The Mesh, an online media network of shows and programs ranging from business to arts, sports to entertainment, music to community. All programs are available on the website as well as through iTunes and YouTube. Check us out online at themesh.tv. Discover other network shows and give us feedback on what you just heard.